welcome to Thinking Green. I am Rana, and before I introduce tonight's guests, I have a couple of announcements. Tomorrow night at All Souls, there is a Songs of Freedom and Struggle concert at Friday Night Folk. It's at 7:30 p.m., and it's going to be Jeff Kaufman, Charlie King, and Karen Brandow. And the songs are going to be about political struggle, environmental struggles. Most of you know Jeff Kaufman from his sea shanty work, but this is more focused for Martin Luther King Day. And then sort of along the same lines, on Sunday at Bean and Leaf, the Southeast Connecticut Peace and Justice Network will be showing the film Inequality for All, about economic lack of equal opportunity in this country. As I said, Sunday the 19th at Bean and Leaf, and it's at 4 p.m. followed by discussion. And that one is free and open to the public. And one other thing, Monday is Martin Luther King Day, and if anyone knows what the local plans are for a march, that's sort of an annual tradition in New London from City Hall to Shiloh Baptist Church. I have not seen anything in the paper, so if anyone knows when the gathering time is or what the details are, please call in. Okay, my guests today are three young people who have started a Green Party in the neighboring town of Waterford. Joshua Kelly, Baird Welch Collins, and Corinne Esty are forming members of a new Green Party. And I know the New London Green Party has been around since about 2000 or 2001, and we've won candidates in elections for many years, but the Waterford Party is brand new. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I guess the first thing I want to ask you is why the Green Party, and why did now seem like the right time to start it?
Well, Baird and I just turned 18 rather recently, and so we've only been able to vote for so long. We looked at a lot of different issues, and we both complained to each other, and finally we said, you know, Republicans, no. Democrats, no. So what is it? And he introduced me to the Green Party, and we both looked at it, and we both said, well, we could do something with this platform. This is what we believe, and so now is a better time than ever. Yeah,
as soon as you've turned 18. And, you know, it's great for me to see because, of course, I turned 18 in 1967, and, you know, young people were pretty politically active at that point, and it has seemed, at least in New London, that the young people are not so active. A lot of college students have big debt loads to worry about, and there seem to be a lot of other things taking up people's attention, and it's really nice to see a party that's been started by people who are just starting to vote. So I'm glad to see that. What has your response been? You've done a little bit of outreach. How are people responding to your new party?
Well, I think people are responding pretty well. Obviously, the biggest challenge at this point is getting people to be aware that there is a Green Party. But beyond that, it's getting people to be aware of what the Green Party is and what our values are. I think that people, especially Democrats, tend to have an idea of what they think the Green Party is, and it is rarely what they think it is. And so I think our first challenge is getting people aware we exist, and our second challenge is getting people to understand what we stand for.
And that's actually not just an issue in Waterford, but it's an issue nationally. Maybe globally, in some European countries, people have a better idea of what the Green Party is. But you're right, that I think that a lot of Democrats in particular just think we're liberal Democrats who are interested in environmental issues and not much else.
Right.
Now, which of the, I've looked at your own issues and your own take on issues. Which of the Green Party values just seem to make an impression on you? That
Yeah, I bet we all have different answers for
Yeah,
this.
we do.
But
That's good.
personally, social justice and social equality for me really stands out. I'm a firm believer that that all people should be treated equally. We're all human beings, and beyond that, all living things should really have a right to life, liberty, and a general sense of freedom. And I think that the green values really encapture that thought, that spirit.
Yeah, I do have a different answer, actually. not far off, but I think ecological wisdom is my favorite one of the 10 key components, just because I think that, you know, in this modern society especially, we've got such a anthropocentric view of the world that it's really not just, you know, destructive for the planet, but it's unhealthy for people, I think both mentally and physically, to have such a focus on, you know, material things and not living things.
It's definitely social justice and equality for me. I've always been really interested in that, and for a while I wasn't interested in politics too much because I believe that social change needs to happen before political change can happen. And then I was introduced to this party more, and I realized that this is a party that would advocate for that a lot. So.
Yeah, and in fact, that's an interesting point of the Green Party, because there are some people in the party who are much more interested in doing the social change.
Right.
You know, a lot of people who watch the show might have been at Fiddlehead's Food Co-op, and that was an endeavor that was largely put forward by people who happen to be Greens, who aren't so much interested in electoral politics, but wanted to change food security in their backyard. And so I think it's one thing that spreads us a little bit thin, because some people are more interested in the electoral side and some people are more interested in just social change. And I have to say, you know, I always used to say the future focus for me was the one that rang true, only because everything else sort of contributed to that. You want to think about what kind of world you want to see in 10 years or 20 years or 50 years. And you know, you try to put in place policies today that will lead us to a world that is, you know, is sustainable and pleasant to live in and, you know, and nourishing down the road. But I have to say that lately I've really gotten to like the decentralization part and just giving individuals the ability to make decisions on as local a level as possible, because that's where we'll all be impacted. And I think that's where we do differ greatly from the Democrats.
Yes.
And may even be a little bit more, similar to libertarians in some parts of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the Green Party, it has, I suppose, just from a government standpoint, it is a libertarian movement in that sense, even though it's economically liberal. And I think that people tend to view politics as kind of a linear system. There's left and there's right. And I think the Green Party really proves that that's not the case, because there's really no way to graph, you know, political ideologies. It's all over the place.
Yeah, and the closest you can come maybe is a circle, but even that doesn't capture it. You know, our experience in New London, when, you know, the Green Party in New London congealed over the issue of eminent domain when houses were being taken in Fort Trumbull. And there were Republicans and Democrats on both sides of the issue, but it was the Green Party and the Libertarian Party that took party stands, and it was the same party stand, and it was just very educational for me, actually, to be on the same side as these people who are on the opposite side of many issues, but we were on this issue exactly the same. We didn't want corporate interests or government interests to be turning people out of their houses for no good reason. And and to this day, a lot of the members of our Taxpayer Association vote Green, support Greens, because there are funny common grounds, even though there are also some areas of disagreement. You know, I don't think, you know, universal health care, they probably don't agree that we should have single-payer universal
Right.
health care. But on many, many issues, there's a lot of agreement there. Now, were you active, all three of you active politically before the Green Party came up? And what kind of involvement did you have?
I would say that we were all fairly politically involved before we started the Green Party. I mean, just the simple dialogue between the three of us about politics was enough to get us on this track already. And also, I know that Baird was in quite a number of political clubs in high school.
Yes, I've been involved in some political things. Before the Green Party, I largely kind of focused on groups, and it kind of accumulated, I support this group, I'd support that group, but the Green Party kind of tied it all together, so.
So what kind of groups?
Well, that's a good question. I think that the group Sea Shepherd, the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, really kind of started my interest in environmentalism. That was a long, long time ago. And then beyond that, I guess that kind of evolved into the aspect of the social justice part of it. And as a folk musician, I guess that kind of tied in too, because I learned about Woody Guthrie and all these people in the IWW. So it really just kind of all came together.
Yeah, and the WWW was quite interesting and quite different from what our labor movement
Right.
looks like in the United States today. That's a whole different show.
Yeah.
What about you? Were you also interested in politics?
I was very interested, but I didn't really get to go out and get involved as much until this kind of gave me an opportunity because I didn't know where to start. I got involved through actually. I was in a show, lucky enough to be in a production of the Laramie Project, which really got me interested in just social rights and stuff like that. So that really was what turned me on to becoming more involved in politics. But I really wasn't able to get too overly involved more than just putting my say out there until this formed. So.
Now, were you involved in high school in politics?
High school, I was involved in politics. In a personal way. I would always keep track of what was going on, and there were a couple times that I made my way down to town hall to make a case. One time, very specifically, when they were debating the town of, or the Board of Education rather, was discussing the budget for the fiscal year, and they were talking about cutting the Spanish, the language program for elementary school kids, and I was very against that, very opposed, in favor of other programs that I didn't think necessarily needed to stay. So that was my freshman year, that really kicked me off, and ever since then I've had a personal connection to politics, and I've always wanted to find a way to express it.
And education, of course, is a very hot issue. In New London, it's a hot issue for for one reason, because we have the state intervention and very authoritarian ideas coming down from the governor's office. But what would you say are the big educational issues in Waterford these days?
I think overall, and this is across the nation, that we are getting a little too focused on standardization, and that's a big problem. You can't ask one kid to perform the same way as another kid when they're not as talented in that area, but they might be exceptionally talented in a different kind of area. And standardization for students is just not beneficial for all humans.
I think that here in Connecticut, that's especially taking the form of the Common Core initiatives, which the state has recently been putting into effect. And I think that on the local level, really what needs to happen is that needs to be resisted as much as possible through really whatever means are available, because any type of standardization of an education system is very, very counterproductive to education, because people are diverse. There's all sorts of different types of people. And in my experience, it's been people that get the highest grades aren't always the hardest workers or the smartest, and the people that fail are sometimes some of the smartest people I've ever known. And a situation like that is really not what you want to see. You mentioned earlier that modern day, young people, they're not as politically active, and I think that the school system in our modern culture has a lot to do with that. It's done a very good job at distracting young people from political issues.
There's so many things going on. Like they just keep introducing more and more tests, and you have students who are told now you're going to take a practice test, and then you'll take the next year. Take the real test the next year, and then suddenly, oh, now you're taking another practice test just because we're going to introduce a different test. And you get students who are now taking standardized testing from 3rd grade all the way until through their senior year of high school, most of them mandatory, and the only ones not being mandatory anymore are the SATs, which you still have to take if you want to get into college. So you just see these students being completely bombarded by tests, when before it was still bad, obviously, going up through 8th grade and then another test to be able to get out of high school your sophomore year. But now it's just all throughout high school, and you never know. There's students who just never know what tests they're going to be taking that year and what they're going to have to work on in classes. And teachers as well. It's unfair to them as well.
I'm thinking, I read something recently, and I have to say I worked for Head Start for many years. I'm a retired preschool teacher. And Head Start was starting to get regimented in that way, that there was a pre-test and a post-test, which was not designed at all for us to track individual children's progress or to be able to serve them better, but it was basically to judge whether our program was doing what they thought it should. And fortunately, that was declared illegal. But it was very scripted. People who gave the test had to follow this certain script word by word. And I've heard the similar thing about teaching lessons with the Common Core, that no teacher of creativity is allowed. You have a very specific script you have to follow. You have to introduce the concepts in a certain order, in a certain way. And, you know, I can imagine it would take all the fun out of the work.
Not only for the students, but for the teachers. And then the way the teachers are now monitored, you know, tenure and things like that don't even matter anymore because of the new ways they're being observed. And sometimes they don't even know if they're going to be observed or not. And so that's really hard for them if they want to do something that some of them have been doing for 5 years, a fun day, something to really apply what they're teaching to for the students. And then you'll get, now they can't do that because they're just so scared that an administrator is going to walk in and write down everything that they're doing, and so they want to be prepared for that, and they have to follow these scripts, and it's hard for them too.
Well, I hate to say it, but I'm kind of glad that some of these problems are showing up in the more affluent districts, because I think it has the potential for creating a solidarity among districts that might struggle with a lot of different problems because they have different demographics. But it sounds as though what's happening in Waterford is a little bit different from what's happening in New London, but not that much. You know, parents can opt their children out of the test, but they're not really very well informed about that. And part of my concern about the testing is who the data that's being collected is being shared with. There are a lot of privacy issues, and parents can also opt out of having, like, the U.S. military get hold of the data from their kids' test taking, but it's not publicized very much. It's, you know, maybe on the last page of a parent handbook that's 50 pages long, and not very well explained that, yes, parents are allowed to say, don't share my son or daughter's information, but I don't think many parents know about it or take advantage of it.
Yeah.
So other than education, which I guess since you're not that long out of high school, you really have a very fresh view of, what other issues do you see in Waterford that really could use a little bit of a greening?
Well, I think that land management issues, those are always a good one to talk about, especially along the shoreline, because there's always going to be someone wanting to develop some area along the shoreline. And really anywhere in Waterford technically is part of the shoreline because it all runs off. And there's many issues like that in Waterford. And East Lyme, there's the whole Oswegatchie Hills situation.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty interesting.
And that's been persisting for...
That's been persisting for a while.
Yeah, for a long time.
But in Waterford, we have a few issues like that. Like the Cohansey School property, I know the town is interested in using it for commercial development. And we are opposed to that, quite obviously, because it should not be commercially developed. It should be preserved. There's a lot of forest back there.
There is a huge amount of forest
Yeah.
back there. I had a Head Start classroom at Cohansey for a few years, way back in the 80s. And that was fantastic, really, that the students could go
Yeah.
and wander in the forest. But, so what are the plan, is it thought that it's because it's fairly close to Crystal Mall, it would be prime for development?
I believe that's the thinking. That's kind of the same thinking that's used really anywhere in the United States when it comes to development, is that the idea that land that isn't being used is worthless, and that land that is just lying fallow, I guess to be the term, has no real value. And that's really something that it's startling to see here in Waterford, and it's a little bit frightening. Because if we're just going to look at this land and say it's valueless for the life that's there, then what are we saying about the Waterford Beach property? What are we saying about really any coastal
Well,
area?
the seaside property is a
Right.
prime example
It's another
of
good
an
one.
opportunity that the town had and
Right.
kind of threw away.
Yeah.
Do you think part of it is driven by fear that, the Millstone dollars aren't going to support the Waterford economy forever?
Yes, I've talked with town people, and the one thing that kind of stands true is Millstone is almost a looming threat to anyone who wants to do really anything in the town that doesn't fall into the status quo. Millstone provides a huge quantity of the tax dollars to the town, and both Democrats and Republicans are very good at being submissive when it comes to large businesses, especially energy businesses like Millstone.
Well, we see that in general in the Southeast Connecticut region with the military, like EB and all of the related military industry. A few years ago, I went to a conference up at UConn on like peacetime conversion, and there's research. They know there's more jobs and more income generated from healthcare-related jobs and from greener jobs. But it's daunting for a lot of people to convert from what you know to what you
Right.
don't feel that comfortable with. But Millstone, I've always thought it very aptly named, eventually is going to be a real problem.
Right.
I don't know how long the last license was for, but even at its, even if it runs to the end of that licensing period, if you're looking 30 or 50 years down the road, Waterford is not going to have that revenue, and it might be a liability because of cleanup issues.
Right, yeah. That's a very real possibility, is that if Millstone eventually does shut down, which it will have to, obviously, is that Waterford is going to be left with the cleanup problems from the fuel rods and just the whole general area. And theoretically, that shouldn't happen, but there are many, many examples all across the country of where corporations take over, an area and there's environmental destruction, and then it does not end up coming, the money doesn't end up coming from the corporation to pay for it. It ends up coming from the taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, either ratepayers or
Right.
town taxpayers. Well, a friend of mine had observed that, in our system of capitalism, which isn't really capitalism
Right.
exactly, it's more corporatism, profits are privatized, but costs are socialized.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the worst of both worlds. I think pure capitalism, where the people who are, getting the profits are also responsible for the cleanup costs, would be, which is more a libertarian view,
Right.
would be relatively good compared to what we have.
Right. Compared to what we have now, I think that libertarian capitalism would be an advantage, because I've heard a lot of terms used to describe what our current economic system is, and I know Bernie Sanders uses the term hyper-capitalism. A lot of people use the term corporate fascism even,
Yeah.
because it's very similar. I mean, when you have corporations and politicians so closely connected, it almost becomes you can't tell the difference between them.
And I guess we can move from that into the whole general issue with the Green Party and corporate influence on policies nationwide. One of the tenets of the Green Party is that there's no corporate donations accepted, and many of the parties don't take even PAC money.
Right.
So I don't know. Do you see that as something that could spread from the Green Party outward?
I hope so. I really hope that it does. I believe that corporations influence politics too much. Republicans and Democrats are taking a little too much money and a little too much influence from some of these corporations. And if it could become a general rule of thumb to not accept donations from corporations, I think we could really get down to good policy making in the United States.
Yeah, some of the thing, I mean, I printed out this thing I found on the internet today about TPP.
Oh, yes.
And I don't know if all the viewers know about TPP, but would you like to talk about it a little?
Well, I heard it described a little bit as the NAFTA on steroids, the North American Free Trade Agreement. And so I think that that's generally kind of the problem with it, is it's just more of this free trade that's going to, I mean, the TPP is really an issue not just in America, but it is really all around the Pacific countries, because we've got, Vietnam, where child labor is perfectly legal, and then just as an example, and then in the U.S., we have jobs going from unionized workers here to, 12-year-old girls in Vietnam. And so that really is the heart of the issue with TPP.
Yeah, and one of the other pieces of it is that corporations actually would be given power over governments.
Right.
They'd be able to sue governments that tried to make laws that would cut into profits. And once again, what you had said about how the cleanup is usually not done by the people who are doing the pollution, we could end up with a terrible situation that taxpayers and citizens are paying for conditions that are being caused by the corporations, and their governments are kind of helpless against it. It's a pretty short-term view. So anyone, the TPP is, I guess it is not being fast-tracked at this point, right. But it could be hugely dangerous if people are concerned about GMOs in their food. Mm-hmm. It could be a big problem for, any state, country, municipality that wants to keep out GMO seeds, for example. So that is part of that whole problem. You know what? It's almost 7:30. I think we're going to take a break and go to the community calendar. It's got a lot of events related to the hygienic coming up. And then we'll come back. We invite you to call in, and we'll talk more about Waterford issues and national issues.
All right, sounds good.
Okay.
He borrowed from his dad. He cracks his whip so lively just to see his lady smile. But she knows he's only putting on the style.
Putting on the agony, putting on the style. That's what all the young folks are doing all the while. And as I look around me, I'm very apt to smile to see so many people putting on the style.
Sweet 16 goes to church just to see the boys. Laughs and giggles at every little noise. She turns this way a little, then turns that way a while. But the boys all know she's only putting on the style.
Putting on the agony, putting on the style. That's what all the young folks are doing all the while. And as I look around me, I'm very apt to smile to see so many people putting on the style.
Young man down from college makes a great display with a great big jaw break which he can hardly say. Can't be found in Webster's, and it won't be for a while. But everybody knows he's putting on the style.
Putting on the agony, putting on the style. That's what all the young folks are doing all the while. And as I look around me, I'm very apt to smile to see so many people putting on the style.
Young man in a restaurant smokes that dirty pipe, looking like a pumpkin that's only halfway ripe. Smoking, chewing, drinking, and thinking all the while that there ain't nothing equal to putting on the style.
Putting on the agony, putting on the style. That's what all the young folks are doing all the while. As I look around me, I'm very apt to smile to see so many people putting on the style.
Country lads and lasses are going to the scene, looking fresh as dewdrops on a bunch of garden greens. Gingerbread and candy, eating all the while, and going to the circus, putting on the style.
Putting on the agony, putting on the style. That's what all the young folks are doing all the while. And as I look around me, I'm very apt to smile to see so many people putting on the style.
Preacher in the pulpit, shouting with all his might, glory, hallelujah, puts the people in a fright. You might think that Satan's coming up and down the aisle, but it's only the preacher putting on the style.
Putting on the agony, putting on the style. That's what all the young folks are doing all the while. As I look around me, I'm very apt to smile to see so many people putting on the style.
Songwriters from college take a turn on stage, glad that self-expression is finally all the rage. Judges and producers take tickets with a smile, unplugged and acoustic, they're putting on the style.
Putting on the agony, putting on the style. That's what all the young folks are doing all the while. As I look around me, I'm very apt to smile to see so many people putting on the style. Putting on the agony, putting on the style. That's what all the young folks are doing all the while. As I look around me, I'm very apt to smile to see so many people putting on the style.
Welcome back to Thinking Green. I'm here with Joshua Baird and Corinne, and they are founding members of the Waterford Green Party, which is very exciting to me because until very recently, New London Greens were the only Green Party in Southeast Connecticut. About 6 months ago, a Norwich chapter started, and now Waterford. I think we might be the most green corner of the state at this point. So if people want to find out more about what the Waterford Greens are up to, how can they go about doing that?
They can visit our website, www.waterfordgreenparty.org. They can also email us, info@waterfordgreenparty.org to get in touch with us, or they can mail us at 9 Farmstead Lane if they don't have access to the internet, and just ask how they would best be suited to get involved, offer their assistance, and there's a whole calendar of events if they want to see when our meetings are on our website.
And you meet at the Waterford Library, so
Right.
it's very
Yep.
convenient.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the challenges you've had, I think, because you're appealing largely to young people, is getting people registered, not just green, but registered to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So what would your suggestions be for people who are watching, who might be 17 or 18 years old and be saying, why should I register? You know, it doesn't make a difference.
It does make a difference. People think it doesn't make a difference, but when you have enough people who think, well, I'm going to vote against the opposing thing, but I don't think I'm going to vote because it won't make a difference, there's hundreds of people out there who are also thinking the same thing, and if you all voted, then it would make a difference. So, you know, you do have to register, you do have to sign up and vote, because your voice does mean something.
Well, I think that if you're voting Democrat or Republican, your voice doesn't mean as much as if you're voting for a minority party. And I think that's for two reasons. One is there's very little difference in policy-wise between Democrats and Republicans, and also because when you're voting for minority party, your vote is a protest, in a sense. It means a lot more because there's fewer of them.
Yeah, I agree. And on top of that, I think that I'm sorry, I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh. Well, you know, it's interesting. I mentioned before when David Cobb was in New London 2 years ago, but he was also came for the first time in 2004 when he was running for president. And at that time, there was huge pressure for people, you know, to vote for the lesser of two evils, vote for Kerry. And it was, one of the things he said is, even if you don't feel like you can vote Green this time, register Green, because that makes a difference too. And there are only about 2,000 registered Greens in Connecticut, but you know, that number could rise. And at that point, you can start to have some influence on policy because the Democrats and Republicans are seeing that they're disenchanting people. And besides, such a high percentage of people that registered in Connecticut are unaffiliated with any party. And, you know, that's sort of a good group to try to appeal to Green Party-wise.
And I also remember what I was going to say. For local elections, so many fewer people come out to vote for local elections. So when you have Greens, when you have a minority party running in local elections, every vote towards them really counts. Because there are so few people voting on the total, your percentage can get very high if you have enough people following you.
And in some places, in Connecticut also, Greens have gotten election, particularly where there are district representation, where the Green candidate can literally knock on every door in the district. And, you know, once they show up, you know, they're a real person. So talking about electoral politics, do you have plans to get involved in Waterford elections sometime in the next year or so?
Yes, we do. I'll field that one. So the next major Waterford election cycle is in 2015, because they fall in odd years. And we have an advantage in that we're formed now, so we kind of have a year to prepare before we have to really start buckling down to campaigns. At this point, we're really looking for candidates, anyone who would be interested in running on the Green Party platform. We found a couple so far. I know Josh's parents might be considering running. I know my father, Dr. Collins, is probably going to run for Board of Ed. Beyond that, we're really looking for candidates. So if anyone wants to run, contact me.
So now I did live in Waterford at one time, but I don't remember. The school board positions are at large, or are they district? Do you vote for just a representative from your neighborhood?
I believe they're at large.
I think they're at
yeah, they're at
okay,
large.
and RTM is
district.
Is district.
Yeah.
And you're looking for candidates probably for both Board of Ed and for RTM?
Yes.
Yeah.
See, and to me, RTM would be very appealing, having run in a citywide council election in New London, and you know, you need 1,500 votes out of all the voters to get elected, and you just can't knock on 5,000 doors. And for each district in Waterford, it would be pretty doable, especially since the Republicans and Democrats are pretty even, I think, in Waterford.
Yeah,
fairly even, yeah.
Yeah, so you're looking for candidates, I mean, not necessarily to say yes right now, but for Board of Ed and for RTM for 2015. Now, does Waterford also have elected like planning and zoning board
Yes.
people?
Yes.
Yep. Planning and Zoning, Board of Appeals. Then, of course, there are selectmen, and there's a town clerk. There are all kinds of other elected positions that we would love to have people run for if they were interested, of course.
Yeah, some of them in particular would be like planning and zoning, or, there's probably a conservation commission, would be natural places for Greens to get involved. The land use issues you bring up are huge in Waterford right now. Right. Now, you mentioned Cohansey School earlier. What would you envision as a good reuse of Cohansey School?
Well, I think the ideal would be, I know right now the town is looking into the environmental cleanup of the property, but I think the ultimate ideal would be to have it turned into a town property, into a park, have it be preserved that way. Failing that, obviously anything that saved the property from corporate development for industrial purposes would be better than nothing.
Well, I have a friend who grew up in Linwood, New Jersey, and he said all the old schools, even if they close down, the city keeps them and keeps them maintained sometimes for a decade until they figure out what a good public use would be. And of course, in the case of Cohansey School, it's not just the building. It's, I don't know how many acres it's sitting on, but it's
quite a bit of land. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, is the same thing happening? Now, Southwest School is only partly occupied as well.
As far as I know, that one is being occupied and it's being maintained and it is at use.
I know it's being partly used by Learn,
Yes.
their Dual Language Arts Academy is there. And of course, Southwest doesn't have the huge acreage that Cohansey does. But Oswegatchie is still in existence in Quaker Hill and Great Neck.
Yes.
Yes. 3 of them.
Okay, so really Cohansey is the big issue.
Right.
Yep.
I guess we have only about 10 more minutes left, but I think it might be a good idea because some people still don't really know what the Green Party is about, to talk about some big issues. What do you see, I guess, as the unique Green Party take on major issues like energy or transportation or whatever, your choice?
You want to start?
Sure. Well, as far as energy goes, of course, Greens are obviously very about renewable energy. Not nuclear, not fossil fuels, things that can be sustained for as long as humans inhabit the earth. It's very important to not use up our natural resources. It's very important to not pollute to the point where it's no longer a good thing for humans, where it taxes our health.
We're seeing that.
Yes, and we're already seeing it.
Energy-wise, I think a lot of people think it's not practical to have just solar and wind power our country, but I would point people who believe that to look at Germany as the example. They're going to be powered almost 100% by solar within a few years. I think it's 5 years. And they're a major industrialized nation. And when you look at the average of how much sunlight countries get, we get far more than Germany. So it's a very practical, very real possibility that we could power America off of renewable energy. And we could do it very quickly and create jobs while we're at it.
Lord knows we have so many parking lots. And I've seen pictures of the German parking lots with solar panels. Right. And honestly, people would love to park under a panel that would shade it in the summer and keep snow off in the winter. It would be so much better than where people are parking now. So yeah, and I want to also point out that nuclear isn't all that practical when you look at the lifetime from the huge cost of building it to the huge cost of dismantling it. Maybe it seems efficient during that period in the middle, but in the beginning and in the end, it isn't.
It's definitely a possibility for the United States to be able to be run easily on green energy. You see countries over in Europe, granted they're much smaller than ours, that create so much wind energy and solar energy that they sell it to other countries. So we have so much space and so many different areas that could obviously get more wind or more sun than certain areas of the country. But then we can just funnel that energy easy enough to other areas who may not get as much sunlight or as much wind. And it still needs to be worked at, though, because there are states that don't allow wind turbines, which is pretty difficult.
Well, there are subdivisions that don't allow clotheslines.
Yeah.
So and it's the same mentality, really. I think that starting out in Waterford, though, in spite of the existence of Millstone, I know in terms of the Waterford school building, and they put geothermal in the schools. So
Yeah.
there is some sort of impetus for that this works and it can be done, and it can be done at a reasonable cost, and it has a practical side. And, you know, this goes also back to the Green Party issue of decentralization. It's so inefficient to be, you know, moving our power over lines over thousands of miles.
Right.
That, you know, it just isn't what we do that we think is practical isn't always that practical. I looked at, I looked at your issues. Yeah, nonviolence, that's, how would that apply locally, and then how do you apply that more with a national view?
Well, I think that locally it's kind of limited in its applications, but I think that there are applications. I mean, obviously in every day-to-day life, you know, nonviolence is great to practice, but beyond that, you know, we live very close to the subbase, we live very close to Electric Boat, to these military industrial facilities, and nonviolence kind of means that we don't look too favorably on them, I think. That's not necessarily a popular view in this area, but it's one that we have. I think on a larger scale, though, on an international scale, nonviolence is a lot more important, and it's a lot more obvious. It means that we oppose drone strikes. That's a big one. We oppose supporting nations such as Israel that are using violent means to be imperialistic. We oppose our own means of being imperialistic.
Yeah, Uri Avneri, old-time Hebrew Israeli peacenik, wrote long ago about how the narratives in the United States and Israel were so similar, and they were kind of imperialist in the same way we are. I think it's a more general colonialist kind of view, but it's, you know, a lot of money goes to prop that up.
Right.
And, you know, nonviolence, I always think about how that's really inefficient. It's like if you live on a block and you have a neighborhood and you're nice to your neighbors, you don't need to buy security systems or guards or, you know, guns for your house. You're just getting along. It costs a lot to have a hostile relationship with your neighbor or with the world. Let's see, economics. What do you think? What about the economic side? What could the Greens do for, you know, businesses in Waterford and Southeast Connecticut?
And a special focus on local business, small business, community business is really what the Green Party is all about. Corporations get money from from everyday people, and a lot of them. And so for every person that chooses not to spend their dollar at a large corporation is something that goes to supporting the local area, the local town, the local community, and is something that will help support such a community. And I think that it's important to, and I think that the Green Party also thinks that it's important to support local businesses and small business owners too.
Yeah.
I think that also worker-owned businesses and workplace democracy are really important. I know that Waterford has a couple of worker-owned, I believe there's steel plants.
Oh, wow.
One of them, at least one of them, and that's really good. I think that, you know, we want to see that on a much larger scale.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
I think it can be tough at times for some businesses in Waterford because we have one of the largest and considered best malls in the area. And so there's a lot of people who come and just will go straight to that mall to get whatever they need. And we have great stores for clothing and all sorts of things all around Waterford and around New London and East Lyme as well. And it's Waterford and going into like Niantic, there are also huge tourist areas as well. We may not see it, seeing as we're here all the time, but for people who come from central Connecticut who want to go to the beach, where are the places to go? And it can be so easy to go, I want to go shopping for a day and go to the mall. But we really want to support and promote these wonderful local businesses we have, a lot of them which are also pretty green.
Yeah, and the money stays in the community to a much greater extent. New London, in a way, is more fortunate than Waterford because the big chains aren't really that interested in locating in New London itself. You know, if there were a Starbucks downtown, it would probably put 4 coffee shops out of business that are locally owned and all have their own favorite clientele and their own little quirks.
Yeah.
So it is a challenge. And I was just, not as part of the Green Party, but I was going to ask you if there are any groups that are trying to get the businesses in Waterford, the small ones, together to like advertise together, or could be something.
I don't know of anything like that, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I've just
Yeah, I haven't heard. I know in New London we have a New London Local First organization, but I was curious because Waterford actually has a lot of small businesses too. They're just not right in the mall area.
Right.
They're more spread
out.
Yeah,
we don't really have a
in
main
the
street.
pockets. No, and in fact that's been in the news recently, right? Maybe we have about 3 more minutes. Maybe you can talk about Main Street in Waterford and the lack thereof.
All right. Well, I don't know much about it, but I know that the town of Waterford is interested in renaming one of the streets Main Street. And they've thrown around a lot of different ideas. Some of them are pretty ridiculous, and some of them make a lot of sense. So I'm hoping to settle on one that makes a lot of sense.
They've suggested Green Tree, Boston Post Road, and Rote Ferry Road are the three of the top choices right now. And it'd be good because we do have a center of town more or less, but it would really probably help bring more of a sense of community.
Yeah, to have some place that's really associated with Waterford.
Yes.
Because that is true. Jordan Village is, in a way...
Right.
Yeah, that's connected right next to our center of town, so yes.
Is not far from the City Hall and the schools. And, once again, since we're on our last couple minutes, let people know what kind of help you could use, what they can do if they're interested in registering at all, or changing their registration to green, or how to get in touch with you.
If you're interested in registering as a green, we have on our website, you can go to our website, we have a link right to the registration form that you can print out, send to your local town office. If you're interested in volunteering with the Waterford Greens, we have a whole volunteer section where you can look at a list of some of the things we need on our website. But we are looking for people to come and voice their own opinions, voice their own ideas at our meetings. We're also looking for people to run as candidates. And of course, we're always looking for people to help run just various events, people who are interested in helping out in a more physical way. Anything to add?
You can find us on Facebook and on Twitter, and we have a website as well, www.waterfordgreenparty.org.
1 minute.
Okay, we still have another minute.
And that's just about what I was going to say.
Yeah. I recommend that people come to our monthly meetings if they want to get involved, because that's where much of the discussion takes place. They're once a month at the Waterford Library, and generally they are, and we advertise that on our website and on Facebook beforehand.
And I'd also like to add that, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but just to clarify that we do have a calendar of events on our website. So if you're ever wondering about any Green Party event that's coming up, you can always check the calendar of events on our website.
And you don't have to be a registered Green or 18 years old to attend.
Not at all.
Not at all.
If you're interested, show up, and I'm sure you could pick up a registration form on the spot if you wanted.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for coming on. I hope people check out the Waterford Greens. Next week, we're going to have Amy D'Amico from Habitat for Humanity and someone from the Restore, so we're going to be talking about that. And until then, we'll have a great week, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.